Welcome to this rapid revision exam skills video looking at paper 2, the British depth study, and question 2, explain, for 12 marks. Firstly, a recap of what the Pearson Edexcel paper 2 actually involves. It's traditionally split in two, between a British depth study, for example Henry VIII and his ministers 1509 to 1540, which will be the focus of this video, and then a European or wider world depth study, for example the American West. In the past, these have been provided as separate booklets, answered within the same exam, and you're given 1 hour and 50 minutes to do both booklets, so that's roughly 55 minutes per section. So here's an example of a question 2, this time taken from the 2025 exam paper. It's worth 12 marks, which gives you an idea of how long you should probably spend on it, somewhere around 18 to 20 minutes. It also provides you with some stimulus points. You may use these in your answer, but crucially, you must also use information of your own. So you will get credit for using these things, but you'll get more credit for using things of your own, and actually you can just use your own knowledge if you want. However, I always advise people to use the stimulus points if you know them, because you know they're definitely valid. So what's this question actually asking about? Well, it says, explain why Cromwell was involved in arranging King Henry VIII's marriages in the years 1533 to 1540. So it's probably going to be a more about arranging the marriage to Anne Boleyn rather than just the annulment from Catherine of Aragon. It'll have some relevance looking at Jane Seymour, but also Anne of Cleves, who's one of our stimulus points. So let's see what this question actually requires of you. For this question, you will need to explain reasons why Cromwell was involved in Henry's marriages. This is what it might look like in part of the mark scheme. You're given 6 marks for AO1 and 6 marks for AO2. So that would be knowledge and understanding of features and characteristics, AO1, and analysis of second order concepts, in this case causation, AO2. You should include enough examples, and 3 is probably sufficient, with a consistent line of analysis and explanation. A conclusion can be helpful, but it's not actually required, so that's very much up to you and your style. And like I said earlier, aim to spend about 18 minutes on this question. Let's have a more detailed look then at the exam board's mark scheme. It says an explanation is given showing some analysis which is mainly directed at the conceptual focus of the question. Well, compare that to the level 4 answer. An analytical explanation is given which is directed consistently at the conceptual focus of the question. Next up, it says a line of reasoning that is generally sustained, although some passages may lack coherence and organisation. Compare that to this one, showing a line of reasoning that is coherent, sustained and logically structured. So it might, for example, make sense to put your examples in chronological order. It says accurate and relevant information is included, showing good knowledge for level 3, but accurate and relevant information is precisely selected to address the question directly, showing wide-ranging knowledge and understanding of the required features and characteristics of the period studied. And just be a little bit careful, a maximum of 8 marks can be awarded for level 3 answers that do not go beyond the aspects prompted by the stimulus points. So just bear that in mind as you're answering this question. Remind yourself of the question again. Explain why Cromwell was involved in arranging King Henry VIII's marriages in the years 1533 to 1540. You might want to add some bullet points of your own so that you can see which examples you're actually going to include and tick them off as you go along. I structure my answers like this: point, example, explain and link. I'm never going to claim that my example answers on here are absolutely perfect. I've often not really got enough space to display everything that I'd like to mention on this screen, but it shouldn't be too bad and it'll give you the idea. Firstly, making my point. One reason Cromwell was involved in arranging Henry's marriages was because he wanted to help secure the succession. Nice and to the point there. Then my example. Henry's marriage to Catherine of Aragon had not provided a male heir. Therefore, Cromwell used Parliament to secure a legal basis for an annulment in the Act in Restraint of Appeals in 1533. There's my example, and now I explain it. This law stated that England was an empire, and that Henry was therefore the head of the church affairs in England, not the Pope. This allowed Henry to legally grant himself a divorce. Then my link. This shows why Cromwell got involved in Henry's marriages, as he was able to use his considerable political skill and legal experience to provide a legal basis for an annulment in the way that Wolsey had failed to do so, and give Henry the chance to marry someone else and secure a male heir. Alright, so I get AO2 here for the explanation, AO1 here for my knowledge, and a mixture of both here, and then I finally explain it in relation to the question. So I've made a reasonable start, but I need some more. Another reason for his involvement in arranging Henry's marriages was his desire for religious reform. Cromwell was interested in reforming England's church in a more Protestant way. Anne Boleyn was also interested in reforming the church, and she had considerable influence over Henry. This meant that securing a divorce from Catherine of Aragon could be done through a break with Rome and making Henry head of the church, which in turn might lead to further Protestant reforms. This shows why Cromwell arranged Henry's marriages, as he was able to use this desire for reform to find a way of securing the annulment outside of religious agreements with the Pope, as Wolsey had tried to do. Again, a good mixture of AO1 and AO2 explanation points here. Let's get on to our final paragraph. Finally, Cromwell remained involved in Henry's marriages, as he wanted Henry to have a second son and heir. Jane Seymour died in 1537, shortly after the birth of Edward. Both Henry and Cromwell were aware of the risks of only having one legitimate heir, especially after the death of Henry Fitzroy and Henry's brother Arthur. This meant that after a period of mourning, Cromwell actively encouraged Henry to marry again, suggesting a marriage to Anne of Cleves and a resulting alliance with another Protestant-leaning state. This shows why Cromwell got involved in Henry's marriages, as it was his job to assist Henry in achieving his aims, and a marriage to Anne of Cleves was hoped to provide both an alliance and the hope of another male heir. Of course, you might already be aware that doesn't quite go to plan, but that's not relevant to this question. Again, a nice mix of AO1 and AO2 marks throughout. So where can you go wrong with this question? Well, perhaps most obviously if you simply don't have the knowledge and you're not including accurate or relevant examples, or if you're just making mistakes. But have a look at this paragraph, see if you can spot what the problem is. Cromwell was involved in a rivalry with the Duke of Norfolk. Norfolk was the uncle of Catherine Howard and desired Henry to marry her. He was also a devout Catholic. This meant that Norfolk was interested in discrediting Cromwell, who he hated for his Protestant traits and for his failure with the marriage to Anne of Cleves, not to mention the fact that of course he was very low born. This meant that Norfolk was able to arrange for Cromwell's arrest and eventual execution, clearing the way for Henry to marry Catherine Howard in 1540. Alright, all of this is accurate. It's about marriages. But is it actually relevant to the question? Well, what I've actually done here is I've accidentally strayed into the realms of talking about the Duke of Norfolk and not Cromwell. Although he gets a very brief mention, it's not relevant to the question. So unfortunately, none of this would actually get any credit, despite the fact that it's basically factually accurate. Here's some to practice yourself. Explain why Cromwell made changes to government in the years 1534 to 40. Explain why the Pilgrimage of Grace 1536 was a failure. Explain why Wolsey had become Henry VIII's most important minister by 1519. You can always pause the video here and note down some of these questions for yourself. Our final points then. 12-mark explain questions require detailed knowledge and precise explanation. You will be provided with 2 stimulus points which you may use, but you will need to include examples from your own knowledge too. You will need to explain your answer in relation to the issue raised by the question. Keep this in mind. And I use point, example, explain and link to structure my answers. You might find it helpful to do so as well. But that's the end of this video. I'll say thank you very much for watching, and if it has been useful, please do like the video and consider subscribing to the channel. All the best and goodbye.